The rise of Tendo. In the serene village of Bukoto, nestled in the rolling green hills of East Africa, a young woman named Tendo grew up with dreams that stretched far beyond the horizon. Her family's humble home, made of mud bricks and thatched roofs, was a constant reminder of their struggles, but Tendo's determination to rise above their poverty burned like a fire in her soul. Tendo was the eldest of 6 siblings and the beacon of hope for her family. Her father, a subsistence farmer, and her mother, a hardworking tailor, scraped together what little they could to provide for their children. Life in Bukoto was beautiful but unforgiving. Droughts, floods, and market instability often left the family with barely enough to eat. Yet, amidst these hardships, Tendo stood out as a beacon of brilliance. From the moment she first held a book, Tendo had a hunger for knowledge that no hardship could quench. She excelled in her village school, always at the top of her class. Her teachers marveled at her sharp mind and often whispered amongst themselves that she was destined for greatness. But her journey was far from easy. With limited resources, Tendo studied by the dim light of a kerosene lamp, using old, tattered textbooks donated by well-wishers. She often skipped meals to save the little money her family had for school fees. One fateful afternoon, during her final year of secondary school, Tendo received news that would change her life forever. She had won a full scholarship to the prestigious Makoma University in the city, an honor so rare that it sent waves of excitement through the entire village. Her parents wept tears of joy, while the villagers celebrated Tendo as a symbol of hope. For her family, Tendo's education was not just her dream, it was their collective ticket to a better future. The transition to university life was both exhilarating and daunting. The city was a world unlike anything Tendo had ever experienced. Its skyscrapers, bustling markets, an endless sea of people overwhelmed her at first. But Tendo adapted quickly, immersing herself in her studies and working tirelessly to make her parents proud. She majored in economics, driven by the hope of understanding the financial systems that could lift families like hers out of poverty. Her journey was not without sacrifices. Her parents sold their last piece of land to ensure she had money for transport, books, and basic needs. Her younger siblings often went without new clothes or school supplies, but no one complained. Tendo carried the weight of her family's sacrifices on her shoulders like a mantle, pushing herself to excel. 4 years passed, and Tendo graduated with honors, ranking among the top students in her class. Her parents traveled from Bukoto to witness her graduation, a moment of pride that felt like a reward for years of struggle. As she stood on the stage to receive her certificate, Tendo's eyes welled with tears. She had done it. But as the applause echoed in her ears, she was acutely aware of what lay ahead, the daunting responsibility of lifting her family out of poverty. After graduation, Tendo returned home briefly to bask in her family's love and gratitude. Her parents held a modest celebration, inviting neighbors and friends to share in their pride. But that night, her father pulled her aside and spoke with a somber tone. "My daughter, you are our star," he said. "We sold everything to make sure you reached this point. Now, your siblings look up to you. You are their hope. You must go to the city and find a good job. Help us educate them, just as we helped you." Tendo nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of their expectations. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she would fulfill her family's dreams. The next morning, she packed her belongings and boarded a bus to the city, clutching her university degree like a shield. The city, once a place of promise, quickly revealed itself to be a battlefield. Tendo sent out countless applications to companies, attending interviews where she was often told she lacked experience. Some employers suggested she could compensate in other ways, offers that filled her with disgust. Despite her qualifications, the job market was ruthless. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but meaningful employment remained elusive. Her savings dwindled, and her family's calls became more frequent. "Tendo, the school fees are due," her mother would say. "Your brother is sick, and we can't afford the hospital bills," her father added. Tendo often cried herself to sleep, torn between her love for her family and the crushing reality of her circumstances. It was during this time of despair that Tendo reconnected with her cousin Sonyu, who had moved to the city years earlier. Sonyu was the embodiment of success, or so it seemed. She lived in a lavish apartment, drove an expensive car, and wore designer clothes that sparkled under the city lights. When Tendo visited her for the first time, she couldn't help but admire Sonyu's lifestyle. "Tendo, you've worked so hard. Why don't you stay with me for a while?" Sonyu offered, her smile warm and inviting. Tendo accepted, grateful for a roof over her head as she continued her job hunt. At first, Sonyu's generosity seemed boundless. She took Tendo shopping, introduced her to her circle of friends, and shared tales of her travels abroad. But beneath the glitz and glamour, Tendo sensed something was amiss. Sonyu was evasive when asked about her job, brushing off the question with vague answers like, "I work with important people." One night, as Tendo was tidying up, she found an envelope stuffed with cash on Sonyu's dressing table. The discovery left her uneasy. How could Sonyu afford such wealth without a visible source of income? The seeds of doubt were planted, but Tendo pushed them aside, focusing instead on her own struggles. Despite her doubts, Tendo couldn't ignore the stark contrast between her life and Sonyu's. While Tendo scraped by, sending small amounts of money home when she could, Sonyu seemed to glide effortlessly through life, unburdened by the struggles that weighed Tendo down. But Tendo resolved to stay true to her values. She would find an honest way to provide for her family, no matter how long it took. As she lay awake one night in Sonyu's guest room, Tendo whispered a silent prayer. "God, help me find a way. I can't fail my family." Little did she know, the challenges ahead would test her resolve in ways she could never imagine. A glittering cage. Tendo's life in the city became a blur of job applications, rejections, and long walks under the scorching sun. Each day felt heavier than the last as she struggled to make ends meet. The city, once promising and vibrant, began to feel suffocating. Yet, amidst the chaos, Sonyu's world stood in stark contrast, a shimmering bubble of luxury that seemed untouchable. Sonyu was nothing short of dazzling. Her apartment sparkled with polished marble floors and gold-accented furniture, the air always perfumed with an expensive floral scent. The sound of her heels clicking on the floor as she moved from one room to another felt almost rhythmic, like a constant reminder of her success. Tendo couldn't help but admire her cousin's ease, the way she seemed to glide through life, unbothered by the struggles that plagued ordinary people. "Tendo, you work too hard," Sonyu said one evening, lounging on her plush leather couch with a glass of red wine in hand. "Life in the city isn't about stress. You need to learn to enjoy it." Tendo forced a smile. "I'll enjoy it when I find a job. I just need to keep trying." Sonyu tilted her head, giving her a long, considering look. "Jobs aren't always the solution, my dear. Sometimes, you have to create your own opportunities." Tendo frowned, unsure of what she meant. Before she could ask, Sonyu changed the subject, launching into a story about her latest shopping spree. As Tendo listened, her cousin's words lingered in her mind, planting seeds of doubt she didn't want to acknowledge. Days turned into weeks, and Tendo's job hunt remained fruitless. She had polished her CV to perfection and walked into countless offices with her best smile, only to leave each one feeling smaller and more defeated. Some interviews started with hope but quickly soured when potential employers made it clear they expected more than just professionalism. "You're beautiful," one manager had said, his eyes roaming where they shouldn't. "I could offer you a position if you're willing to show some appreciation." Tendo left the office in tears, disgusted by the encounter. The pattern repeated itself with unsettling regularity. Even the jobs that seemed legitimate offered wages so low that she couldn't possibly support her family on them. Back at Sonyu's apartment, life was a stark contrast. Sonyu's friends often visited, women dressed in designer clothes and dripping in jewelry, their laughter echoing through the halls. Tendo listened to their conversations from her room, trying to piece together their lives. They spoke about extravagant trips, expensive gifts, and sponsors who funded their lifestyles. It didn't take long for Tendo to realize these women lived off the wealth of older, powerful men. One afternoon, Sonyu invited Tendo to join her and her friends for lunch at an upscale restaurant. Tendo hesitated, feeling out of place in her modest dress, but Sonyu insisted. "You can't stay cooped up in here forever. Come and meet some people. You never know where it might lead." The restaurant was a world apart from anything Tendo had experienced. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and waiters in crisp uniforms moved silently between tables. Sonyu and her friends ordered without glancing at the prices, their conversations loud and carefree. Tendo sat quietly, overwhelmed by the extravagance. During the meal, one of Sonyu's friends turned to her. "So, Tendo, what do you do?" Tendo hesitated, feeling the weight of their curious stares. "I'm looking for a job," she said finally. The woman raised an eyebrow. "In this city? Good luck. It's all about connections here. Without them, you just waste your time." Sonyu laughed, waving a hand dismissively. "Don't scare her." Tendo still figuring things out. The conversation moved on, but Tendo couldn't shake the sting of the woman's words. As they left the restaurant, Sonyu slipped her arm through Tendo's. "Don't take it personally. They are just blunt. But she's not wrong, you need connections to thrive here." Tendo nodded silently, her thoughts a jumble of frustration and doubt. Her family's calls became more frequent, each one adding to her growing desperation. Her mother's voice was filled with concern and hope, a painful combination for Tendo to hear. "We are so proud of you, my daughter," her mother said during one call. "We know you'll find a way to help us soon." Tendo forced a cheerful response, but after hanging up, she sank onto her bed, tears streaming down her face. She felt like she was failing them, failing herself. That evening, Sonyu found her sitting on the balcony, staring at the city lights. "Tendo, you're stressing yourself too much," Sonyu said, sitting beside her. "You can't carry the world on your shoulders." "I don't have a choice," Tendo replied. "My family is depending on me." Sonyu was silent for a moment, then spoke carefully. "There are other ways to make money, you know. Ways that aren't so hard." Tendo looked at her, frowning. "What do you mean?" Sonyu sighed. "I'm saying you could consider options that don't involve traditional jobs. You're a beautiful woman, Tendo. Men in this city would pay anything just to be in your presence." Tendo's heart sank. "Sonyu, I can't do that. I'd never." Sonyu held up a hand. "Relax. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying it's an option. Think about it. You could take care of your family without all this struggle." Tendo shook her head, her stomach turning. "I can't. I won't." Sonyu shrugged, her expression unreadable. "Suit yourself. But don't judge those of us who make it work. Life isn't as black and white as you think." Over the next few days, Tendo couldn't stop replaying the conversation in her mind. As much as she rejected the idea, she couldn't deny the growing desperation in her heart. Her family needed her, and the job market offered no solutions. Was she being stubborn? Was she holding on to principles that were only making her life harder? One night, she sat alone in her room, staring at the modest stack of money she had left. It wouldn't last much longer. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, a reminder of the school fees due for her siblings. The weight of her responsibility felt like it would crush her. She whispered a prayer into the silence. God, show me the way. I don't know what to do. As she drifted to sleep, her thoughts were a chaotic mix of fear, guilt, and uncertainty. She didn't want to compromise her values, but the pressure was becoming unbearable. The city, with all its glittering lights, felt like a cage, and Tendo couldn't see a way out. The invitation. The evening began with a single knock on Tendo's bedroom door. Sonyu, dressed in a flowing emerald green gown that sparkled in the dim light of the hallway, leaned against the frame with an inviting smile. Tendo, I have a surprise for you, she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Tendo, still in her plain cotton dress, glanced up from her laptop. What is it? There's a gala tonight, Sonyu said, walking into the room with the grace of a queen. The kind of event where people make connections that change their lives. And you're coming with me. Tendo frowned. A gala? Sonyu, I can't, look at me. I don't have anything to wear, and I wouldn't even know what to say to those people. Sonyu waved her hand dismissively. Nonsense. I've got you covered. She placed a garment bag on the bed and unzipped it to reveal a stunning evening gown. It was a deep shade of blue, with intricate beading that caught the light. This is yours for the night. Tendo stared at the dress, her breath catching in her throat. It was beautiful, far beyond anything she had ever dreamed of wearing. But a knot of apprehension formed in her stomach. I don't know, Sonyu. You need to get out of this rut, Tendo, Sonyu said, placing a hand on her cousin's shoulder. This isn't just a party. It's an opportunity. You meet people who can help you. People who can open doors. Tendo hesitated, but the thought of networking and possibly finding a job was too tempting to ignore. She nodded slowly. All right, I'll go. The venue was nothing short of breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a warm, golden glow over the room. The sound of a live orchestra filled the air, and the guests, dressed in elegant gowns and tailored suits, moved through the space like characters in a fairy tale. Tendo felt out of place the moment she stepped through the grand doors. She clutched Sonyu's arm tightly, her nerves threatening to overwhelm her. Relax, Sonyu whispered with a smile. You look stunning. No one will even guess you're nervous. As they moved through the crowd, Sonyu greeted people with ease, her laugh ringing out like a bell. Tendo followed silently, nodding politely whenever Sonyu introduced her. The guests were an eclectic mix of politicians, business magnates, and celebrities, all radiating power and wealth. After an hour of mingling, Sonyu leaned close to Tendo. See that man over there, she said, nodding toward a tall figure standing near the bar. He was impeccably dressed in a black suit, his sharp features framed by a neatly trimmed beard. That's Kato. He's a big deal, owns several companies. You should talk to him. Tendo hesitated. I don't know, Sonyu. What would I even say? Just be yourself, Sonyu replied, giving her a gentle push in Kato's direction. Trust me. Kato was leaning casually against the bar when Tendo approached, his piercing eyes scanning the room with the ease of someone used to commanding attention. He turned as she drew near, and a slow smile spread across his face. Good evening, he said, his deep voice smooth and confident. I don't believe we've met. Tendo, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm Sonyu's cousin. Oh, Sonyu, Kato said with a knowing smile. She always brings interesting guests. And you, Tendo, are no exception. Tendo blushed under his gaze. They began talking, and Kato had a way of making her feel at ease, despite the grandeur of the event. He asked about her background, her studies, and her career aspirations, listening intently to every word. "You're impressive," he said after she explained her struggles to find a job. "The kind of person any company would be lucky to have." "Thank you," Tendo said, though she wasn't sure she believed him. "I might have something for you," Kato said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a sleek black business card. "Call me. We'll discuss it." Tendo hesitated before taking the card. Something about his demeanor was both alluring and unsettling. "Thank you," she said again, tucking the card into her clutch. The next morning, Tendo woke with mixed emotions. The gala had been a whirlwind, and Kato's offer lingered in her mind. She had looked him up online the night before and found glowing articles about his business ventures, but something about him felt too perfect. She placed the card on her desk and stared at it for a long moment. "I don't need his help," she told herself firmly. "I'll find a job on my own." Days turned into weeks, and Tendo's situation grew more dire. Her family's calls became more urgent, their voices filled with worry and desperation. Then, one evening, she received the call she had been dreading. Tendo, her younger brother's voice crackled through the phone. "Mama is very sick. The doctor says she needs surgery, and we don't have the money." Tendo's heart sank. "How much do you need?" He hesitated before replying. "It's a lot, Tendo. More than we've ever had." After hanging up, Tendo sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling. She thought of her mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything to see her succeed. How could she feel her now? Her eyes drifted to Kato's card, still sitting on her desk. She picked it up, her heart pounding. Desperation had a way of silencing doubts, and at that moment, all Tendo could think about was saving her mother. With trembling hands, she dialed the number. Into the web. Tendo arrived at Kato's sleek office building with mixed feelings of anticipation and dread. The receptionist greeted her warmly, escorting her to the top floor, where Kato's private office overlooked the city skyline. Everything about the place screamed power and prestige. Yet, as Tendo sat in the plush leather chair across from Kato's desk, she couldn't shake the unease that had followed her since their first meeting. "I'm glad you called," Kato said, leaning back in his chair, his sharp eyes fixed on her. "You're a smart woman, Tendo. I have no doubt you do well here." "What exactly will I be doing?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. Kato smiled. "You'll start as my personal assistant. It's a flexible role, scheduling, attending events, handling some delicate tasks. I need someone I can trust, and you seem like the perfect fit." Tendo hesitated but nodded. The offer was too good to refuse. The salary he mentioned was beyond anything she had imagined, enough to cover her mother's medical bills and still send money home regularly. It felt like a lifeline. "I'll do my best," she said finally. A questionable role. At first, the job seemed legitimate. Tendo organized Kato's meetings, managed his calendar, and accompanied him to high-profile events. The work was demanding, but she threw herself into it, grateful for the opportunity to stabilize her family's finances. Her mother's surgery was successful, and Tendo sent enough money home to cover her siblings' school fees and improve their living conditions. Every phone call from her family was filled with gratitude and praise, and for the first time in months, Tendo felt like she was finally fulfilling her role as the family's provider. But as the weeks passed, Tendo began to notice inconsistencies in Kato's business dealings. There were meetings held late at night in shadowy corners of exclusive clubs. Guests would arrive at his office with briefcases full of cash, their conversations whispered and tense. When she asked Kato about it, he brushed her off. "Just business, Tendo," he said with a charming smile. "You don't need to worry about the details." One evening, Kato asked Tendo to accompany him to a private party. The venue was opulent, filled with influential figures from the city's elite. Tendo felt out of place but followed Keto's lead, introducing herself to politicians, entrepreneurs, and foreign investors. Many of the men were overly friendly, their compliments veiled in suggestiveness. Tendo felt uncomfortable but kept a polite smile, determined to keep her integrity intact. As the night wore on, Keto pulled her aside. "I need you to deliver something for me," he said, handing her a sealed envelope. "Take this to the man by the balcony. His name is Mr. Musok." "What's in it?" Tendo asked, eyeing the envelope suspiciously. Keto's expression darkened slightly, but his tone remained calm. "You don't need to know. Just hand it to him and come back." Tendo hesitated but did as she was told. Mr. Musok accepted the envelope with a knowing smile and a cryptic remark about Keto's deficiency. The exchange left Tendo feeling uneasy, but she convinced herself it was just a harmless errand. Deeper into the shadows. Over time, Keto's requests became more frequent and more suspicious. She was asked to deliver packages, arrange meetings in obscure locations, and even transfer large sums of money between accounts. Tendo tried to ignore the gnawing sense of guilt, reminding herself that everything she did was for her family. After all, they were thriving because of her sacrifices. But the weight of her decisions began to take its toll. She avoided looking at herself in the mirror, unable to face the person she was becoming. Every time she heard her mother's voice on the phone, thanking her for her generosity, the guilt grew heavier. She felt like she was living a double life, one where she was the dutiful daughter and another where she was complicit in a web of deceit. A friend in the shadows. Tendo wasn't alone in her struggle. At one of Keto's gatherings, she met Malaika, a strikingly beautiful woman with a quiet, melancholic demeanor. Malaika had been working for Keto for years, and her presence commanded respect among the circle. She took an immediate liking to Tendo, offering her guidance and support as she navigated her new role. "You remind me of myself when I first started," Malaika said one evening as they sat together after an event. "Bright-eyed, hopeful, determined to make something of yourself." Tendo smiled weakly. "And now?" Malaika's expression darkened. "Now I know better. Keto has a way of pulling people in and making them feel indispensable. But he doesn't care about us, Tendo. To him, we are just tools." Tendo frowned. "Why don't you leave?" Malaika laughed bitterly. "It's not that simple. Keto knows too much about me, things I can't afford to have exposed. And even if I could leave, where would I go? This life has a way of trapping you." Her words sent a chill down Tendo's spine. She had felt the same sense of entrapment growing within her, the realization that every step deeper into Keto's world made it harder to escape. The turning point. One night, Tendo returned to her apartment after a particularly troubling event. Keto had asked her to negotiate with a man who seemed more like a criminal than a businessman, and the entire encounter had left her shaken. As she sat on her bed, staring at the money she had earned that week, she felt a wave of despair. Her phone buzzed with a message from her younger sister. "Thank you for the money, Tendo. Mama says she's proud of you. You're our angel." Tendo's chest tightened. How could she reconcile the praise of her family with the growing guilt in her heart? She wanted to believe she was doing the right thing, but deep down, she knew she was losing herself. The next day, she confided in Malaika. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she admitted. "It's eating me alive." Malaika placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have to be careful, Tendo. Keto doesn't let people leave easily. But if you're serious about getting out, I'll help you. Just promise me one thing, don't wait until it's too late." Tendo nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. But she also knew that leaving Keto's world would be a dangerous game, one she wasn't sure she was ready to play. The unveiling. The more Tendo worked for Keto, the more the layers of his life began to unravel before her eyes. At first, his charm and charisma had shielded the darker truths lurking beneath the surface, but now, she was starting to see Keto for who he truly was. His business empire, which seemed so polished and legitimate from the outside, was riddled with secrets too dangerous to ignore. Keto's sinister truths. One afternoon, Tendo accidentally stumbled upon a meeting she wasn't meant to witness. She had entered Keto's private office to deliver documents when she heard raised voices. Before she could retreat, the door opened slightly, and through the gap, she saw Keto sitting at his desk, flanked by two men with hardened faces. Stacks of cash spilled out of an open briefcase on the desk, alongside ledgers filled with cryptic notations. The conversation was laced with words like offshore accounts, bribes, and disposals. Tendo froze in the hallway, her heart pounding as she realized the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just shady business, this was money laundering, and potentially far worse. She quickly stepped back and pretended to fumble with her phone as the men exited the office. Keto spotted her, his expression sharp and unreadable. "Is everything alright, Tendo?" he asked, his tone calm but laced with a subtle warning. "Yes, sir," she replied, forcing a smile. "I was just waiting to hand you these documents." He nodded and waved her in, but the unease in her stomach didn't subside. She felt like she had crossed an invisible line, one that left her trapped in a web far more dangerous than she had imagined. Malaika's warning. That evening, Tendo confided in Malaika about what she had seen. Malaika's face darkened, and she shook her head. "You've seen too much," she said gravely. "Keto doesn't tolerate loose ends." Tendo's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" Malaika hesitated before speaking. "A few years ago, there was another assistant. She started asking too many questions, getting too close to things Keto wanted hidden. One day, she just disappeared. Keto said she moved to another country, but we all knew better." Tendo felt a cold wave of fear wash over her. "Why didn't you leave, Malaika?" "I tried," Malaika admitted, her voice breaking. "I told Keto I wanted out, that I was done. He didn't take it well." She lifted the sleeve of her blouse to reveal faint scars on her arm. "He made it clear what happens to people who betray him." Tendo stared at the scars, her heart pounding. "Why are you still here?" "Because I have nowhere else to go," Malaika said quietly. "But you still have a chance. Just be careful. Keto watches everyone closely, and he doesn't let go easily." The cracks begin to show. A week later, Tendo received an unexpected call from her family. Her mother and younger brother were coming to visit her in the city. They wanted to see how she was doing and thank her in person for everything she had done for them. Panic set in. How would she maintain the illusion of her glamorous life when they arrived? Sonyu wasn't around to cover for her, and Tendo knew her family would see through any facade she tried to create. When they arrived, Tendo took them to a modest restaurant far from the lavish circles she frequented with Keto. Her mother marveled at the city, her eyes wide with wonder, while her brother asked endless questions about her success. Tendo smiled and answered as vaguely as she could, but her nervousness didn't go unnoticed. "You seem tired," her brother said as they walked back to her apartment. "Is everything okay?" "I'm fine," Tendo replied quickly, but the weight of her double life was becoming unbearable. Later that evening, as her mother slept in the guest room, Tendo sat with her brother on the balcony. The city lights sparkled in the distance, but Tendo felt no comfort in their glow. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Her brother turned to her, his expression serious. "What is it?" Tendo hesitated, then poured out the truth, the shady dealings, Keto's control over her, and the guilt that was eating away at her. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face. Her brother was silent for a moment, then placed a hand on her shoulder. You need to leave, Tendo. Come back home. We'll figure it out together. I can't, she whispered. If I leave, Keto will come after me. And what about the money? How will I support all of you? We'll survive, her brother said firmly. But you won't, not like this. You can't keep living a lie. A dangerous decision. The next morning, Tendo watched her family board a bus back to the village, her mother waving happily from the window. Her brother's parting words echoed in her mind, it's not too late, Tendo. You can still save yourself. But deep down, Tendo knew the road to freedom would not be easy. She had seen too much, done too much, and Keto was not a man who forgave betrayal. As she walked back to her apartment, her phone buzzed with a message from Keto. We need to talk. Come to my office. Tendo's chest tightened. She could feel the walls closing in around her, and she knew she had to make a choice. Stay and continue down a path of guilt and danger, or risk everything to escape before it was too late. The breaking point. Tendo sat in Keto's office, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she waited for him to speak. His piercing gaze lingered on her for a moment too long, and she resisted the urge to look away. She could feel the air between them shift, his usual charm was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper. You've been distracted lately, Keto said, his voice low and deliberate. Is there something I should know? No, sir, Tendo replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. Just a lot on my mind. Keto studied her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. You know, Tendo, trust is everything in my line of work. If I can't trust the people closest to me, well, things can get messy. Tendo swallowed hard, her heart beat thundering in her ears. I understand. Keto gave her a small, tight smile, but the warning in his words was clear. As she left his office, Tendo felt her resolve harden. She couldn't stay under his control any longer. She had to find a way out before it was too late. A plan takes shape. Over the next few weeks, Tendo began to secretly gather evidence of Keto's crimes. She combed through files, intercepted emails, and recorded conversations, carefully documenting everything she could. It was a dangerous game, and she knew the slightest misstep could cost her dearly. Malaika, though hesitant at first, agreed to help. If we do this, there's no going back, she warned. Keto won't just let us walk away. I know, Tendo replied. But I can't live like this anymore. And neither can you. Together, they built a plan. The evidence would be their leverage, not just for their freedom, but to bring Keto's entire operation to light. Malaika reached out to a trusted contact in the media, someone who could expose Keto's network without involving the police, who were likely compromised. The walls closed in. Keto's suspicions grew with each passing day. He began monitoring Tendo's movements more closely, asking pointed questions about her activities and whereabouts. One evening, she returned to her apartment to find one of Keto's men waiting for her. Boss just wants to make sure you're alright, the man said with a smirk. You've been so busy lately. Tendo forced a polite smile, but her stomach churned. Keto was watching her, and she knew it was only a matter of time before he uncovered the truth. The pressure reached a boiling point when Keto summoned her to a private meeting. His tone was calm, almost casual, as he asked about a missing file, a file Tendo had taken to add to her growing collection of evidence. Strange, Keto said, his eyes narrowing slightly. It's not like you to be careless, Tendo. I'll look for it, she said quickly, her voice trembling. It must have been misplaced. Keto stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Do that. As she left his office, Tendo knew her time was running out. The confrontation. Late one night, as Tendo and Malaika finalized their plan, the door to Tendo's apartment burst open. Keto stepped inside, flanked by two of his men. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with fury. "Tendo," he said, his voice unerringly calm. "I've always admired your intelligence. But I never expected you to betray me." Tendo's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," Keto snapped, pulling a folder from his jacket. Inside were printouts of intercepted emails and photographs of Tendo meeting with Malaika's contact. "You thought I wouldn't find out?" Malaika stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Keto, listen." "Silence," he barked, cutting her off. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've jeopardized everything I've built." Keto turned back to Tendo, his expression dark. "I trusted you. I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me." Tendo mustered all her courage. "You gave me nothing but fear and lies. I won't let you control me anymore." Keto's face twisted with rage. "You think you can just walk away? I'll destroy you. Your family, your friends, everyone you care about will pay for this." The breaking point. As Keto's men advanced toward her, Tendo knew she had no choice. She reached into her bag and pulled out a hidden voice recorder, pressing play. Keto's own voice filled the room, detailing his illegal operations in a conversation she had secretly recorded. "If anything happens to me or my family, this recording goes public," Tendo said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "It's already in safe hands. If you want to protect yourself, you let us go." Keto froze, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Tendo replied, meeting his gaze. For a long moment, the room was silent. Then Keto signaled to his men to stand down. "You've made your point," he said coldly. "But don't think this is over." Tendo and Malaika wasted no time. They grabbed the evidence they had gathered and left the apartment, their hearts pounding as they stepped into the night. They knew Keto's threat was real, but for the first time in months, Tendo felt a glimmer of hope. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her life. Redemption and renewal. The night Tendo walked out of Keto's world felt like the longest of her life. With Malaika by her side and the evidence in her possession, she took the first step toward reclaiming her freedom. Their destination was the home of Malaika's contact, a fearless investigative journalist named Alex, who had spent years exposing corruption in the city. Exposing Keto's crimes. Alex listened intently as Tendo and Malaika shared their story, presenting him with the evidence they had painstakingly gathered. The recordings, documents, and photographs painted a damning picture of Keto's operations, money laundering, exploitation, bribery, and connections to a shadowy network of criminals. "This is huge," Alex said, his voice filled with both excitement and caution. "But it won't be easy. Keto has friends in high places." "We know," Tendo said, her voice steady. "That's why we came to you. This needs to come out, no matter what." Over the next few weeks, Alex and his team worked tirelessly to verify the evidence and prepare the story for release. They coordinated with a few trusted authorities who weren't in Keto's pocket, ensuring there would be legal action to back up the expose. Tendo and Malaika lived in hiding during this time, constantly looking over their shoulders and fearing Keto's retaliation. When the story broke, it sent shockwaves through the city. Headlines blared Keto's name alongside words like crime ring, corruption, and arrest warrants. Within days, the authorities raided his offices and properties, seizing assets and detaining several of his associates. Keto himself was arrested while attempting to flee the country. Returning to the village. With Keto behind bars and his network dismantled, Tendo and Malaika could finally breathe. Malaika chose to stay in the city, determined to start over and rebuild her life on her own terms. Tendo, however, knew where she needed to go. She returned to her village one crisp morning, her heart pounding as the familiar sight of Bikoto came into view. The green hills, the dusty roads, and the sound of children playing in the distance brought a wave of nostalgia and comfort. Her family was overjoyed to see her. Her mother embraced her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "My daughter, you're home," she whispered. "We prayed for you every day." Her siblings crowded around her, asking endless questions about her time in the city. Tendo smiled, answering as best as she could without revealing the darker parts of her journey. A new beginning. Tendo used the savings she had managed to protect from her time in the city to open a small community business, a tailoring workshop and training center for young women. The workshop provided jobs and skills training, giving women in the village a chance to earn an honest living and support their families. "I want this to be a place where no one feels trapped," Tendo said during the opening ceremony. "A place where we can build each other up and create opportunities for ourselves." The workshop quickly became a cornerstone of the community, attracting women from neighboring villages as well. Tendo found immense joy in mentoring the young women who came through her doors, teaching them not just tailoring but also resilience and self-worth. A changed family. Over time, Tendo's family came to understand the true cost of the material wealth they had once coveted. They saw the strength and integrity it had taken for Tendo to walk away from Keto's world and build something meaningful from the ground up. Her father, who had once placed the weight of the family's future entirely on her shoulders, apologized for the pressure he had put on her. "You've taught us something we forgot, Tendo," he said one evening as they sat under the stars. "Integrity is worth more than gold. We are proud of you, not for the money you sent, but for the person you've become." Finding peace. Tendo's life in Bikoto was far from the glamour of the city, but it was filled with something far more valuable: peace. She spent her days running the workshop, mentoring young women, and supporting her family. Slowly, she began to heal from the trauma of her past. One day, a man named Daniel visited the workshop. He was a teacher at a nearby school and had come to inquire about uniforms for his students. Over time, Daniel became a regular visitor, drawn not just by the workshop's quality work but by Tendo's strength and kindness. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper, and for the first time in years, Tendo allowed herself to dream of love again. The legacy. As the years passed, Tendo's workshop grew into a thriving business, empowering countless women to pursue honest livelihoods. Her story became an inspiration in the village and beyond, a testament to the power of resilience and integrity. Tendo stood in front of her workshop one sunny afternoon, watching the women inside laugh and work together. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced darkness and emerged stronger, not just for herself but for her family and her community. The shadows of her past no longer haunted her. Tendo had found redemption, renewal, and above all, peace.